On today's show, Lamar Jackson helps out the Baltimore Ravens with a big decision that he made. We talk about that, underrated players who are performing at Baltimore Ravens OTAs, and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We are here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, as always, and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available, all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form, you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, a Ravens show here. So Monday through Friday, we bring you daily Ravens coverage. Plus, we have bonus episodes sometimes over the weekend. We go live after every Ravens game, after every single piece of Ravens big news. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and also if you are in the middle of an everydayer and a first-time listener, thanks to you as well and for all of the support. We have a jam-packed episode today on the show. And again, Ravens wrapping up OTAs this week. They will have 4 days of OTAs from today through Thursday. So going to be really exciting for these guys to get that final taste, especially the younger players on the field and getting some action in. And then the Ravens will transition over to mandatory minicamp. So that's a nice, exciting transition. We're going to talk about a lot of things today. In the final segment, we'll get into a weekend recap. I did do 2 bonus episodes over the weekend. We talked about Lamar Jackson not being able to escape Mike Florio, as well as some pretty wild reporting from Jeremy Fowler that the Ravens almost traded Rashod Bateman before his extension. So we'll talk about that a little bit. In the second part of the show, we'll dive into some underrated players making impacts at OTAs. But first, Lamar Jackson helped out the Ravens, whether intentional or not. It helps out the Ravens, and we'll talk about his decision as well as the discourse surrounding this, because I think there are a couple of schools of thought when it comes to this whole situation. So, Mike Florio, we're just talking a lot about Mike Flores today, aren't we? Yes, Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. He reported that by skipping offseason workouts, Lamar Jackson has forfeited another $750,000. So Lamar Jackson's contract that he signed back in 2023, it includes separate $750,000 workout bonuses, 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027. Now, in order to get that money, he had to show up for 80% of workouts. Now, this same thing happened last year, and I think Florio was actually the person who reported on it last year as well. At least he had it first, if I'm not mistaken. So last year, Lamar Jackson also lost out on this bonus by not participating in the required amount of workouts. And for this year, he did not meet that threshold either. So Florio notes that $750,000 loss drops Jackson's 2025 compensation from $43.5 million to $42.75 million, which of course, to Lamar Jackson is not that much in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, just generally, that is a very big amount of money. But, Lamar Jackson making what he's making, it's a small dent in his contract relative to the total of it. And as Mike Florio does note here, $750,000 is $750,000. Now, Lamar was asked about this last year once it happened at mandatory minicamp, and Jackson declined to talk about it, which, I get and I understand. And look, if he's asked about it again at minicamp, I don't think he's going to talk about it anymore. I just don't. So it is what it is with that. And so he's given up a total of $1.5 million. But Brian McFarland, the Ravens salary cap, who again does a great job talking all things Ravens salary cap. He knows his stuff. We have had him on this show multiple times. Brian gave us a little bit of detail into that $750,000 because it actually does help the Ravens. Now, this time around, it doesn't help the Ravens this year. It will actually help them next year. The $750,000 credit will not have any effect on this year's cap, but will be a credit on the team's 2026 cap. But that cap hit that Lamar, or the cap number, I guess, that Lamar Jackson helped out with Baltimore this season, that came from last year's forfeiture. So it essentially is a 1-year grace period, if you want to call it that. It's probably a bad way to put it, but it's a 1 year time that you have to wait to get that money back on your cap. So the Ravens didn't get any technical benefit from it last season, but they got it this year from last year. So this year's will go to 2026. Now, again, Lamar, intentional or not, this has an impact on Baltimore. It helps the Ravens out. It gives them that tad bit more salary cap relief, which actually is a big deal. And honestly, I think it's a bigger deal than other people might think it is. Now, I'm not going to come on here and say that Lamar Jackson did this to help the team, and that's 100% set in stone. I see a lot of people who have said that. And look, if it is a thing, I wouldn't necessarily be shocked, but there's been no confirmation of that. Lamar, he does his thing. He works out. He gets better. And, it's his decision, much like it is everybody's decision to not show up to voluntary OTAs. We've had this conversation plenty of times over the last couple of weeks here on Locked On Ravens. And for those who have heard it before, you know my stance on it. I'm not going to bash a player for not showing up to something that's voluntary. It'd be awesome if everybody was there every day. But these guys want to do their own work. We saw a clip yesterday of Rashod, Bateman, and Zay Flowers working out together away from the facility. So these guys are still putting in work even if they are not at the facility. And that isn't just during OTAs, right? That is the entire offseason. But, it does have an impact on Baltimore in terms of them getting that money. This could just be Lamar not wanting to be there, right? It easily could be that. I don't want to read too much into this, but the fact that it does help the Ravens, that is undeniable, right? And we know that Derrick DeCosta will try to go through every loophole, try to squeeze out every dollar, EDC, every dollar counts, right? That's what we talk about. Derrick DeCosta is savvy. This Ravens team is savvy. And so you add an extra $750,000 from Lamar Jackson forfeiting his workout bonus here, and that does help out Baltimore. Now, you can do – it's not that big of a money number in terms of what the NFL salary cap is. It's not going to let you sign a player, but it does give you flexibility because we know that the Ravens, they like to carry some cap space into the season. We know that cap space will continue to be used up from practice squad. Guys will get injured. It's the NFL, right? Knock on wood, it doesn't happen all that much for the Ravens this year, but it does happen. They want to carry money for injuries and signing replacements and having to deal with that. Maybe there's a trade the Ravens want to make early or in the middle part of the season where a position might not be working out, or they see a player that's available in the trade market they didn't think was going to be there. And you can use that money to play around with, to work around with, and for a lot of other little things as well. So Lamar has forfeited a total of $1.5 million. It does help the team. And, I think a lot of people are, looking at Lamar as this, oh yeah, he's definitely helping out the team here. I think it's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible that it is, that he's helping out the team here. There's been a discussion or whatnot, but, I also don't want to just come on here and say, yeah, that's 100% true, because we don't have that information. That's the train of thought here. There are multiple different schools of thought with it, where some people are 100% set on Lamar's helping the team. Other people are 100% set that this is not, Lamar's not doing this on purpose and he just doesn't want to be there. Both, it's honestly, it might be a little of both. Like, sincerely, it might be a little of both, where Lamar wants to do his own thing, doesn't want to be there the whole time. He showed up a couple weeks ago at this point and he was able to get some work in, but, he wants to do his own thing until the mandatory stuff starts. And if that's what Lamar wants to do, that's what Lamar wants to do. But understanding that it does help the team, it's kind of a win-win for Lamar. And for the Ravens, these vets not showing up, as we'll kind of get to in the second part of the show, you do get other opportunities to play young guys or guys who won't get those opportunities when Lamar and some of those star players are there. So we'll dive into that point a little more coming up in a few minutes. But there's been this conversation about Lamar's next contract. When is that going to be signed? The cap number for Lamar jumps up to over $70 million next season. You cannot work with that. That is unworkable when it comes to building a contender. $70 million for a cap hit, that has to come down. And that, to me, probably was intentional from Lamar Jackson. That, to me, was probably intentional, where that cap hit and the way that was structured and, everything with the money being spread out the way it was, that to me is honestly probably more intentional than the Lamar forfeiting the workout bonus, because that forces the Ravens to come back to the table. Lamar bet on himself, said, hey, I'm going to sign this deal. I'm going to say in a couple of years, I'm going to exceed that value. and he wants to cash in again, which look, it's a smart move for him. It's a smart move for him. And for the Ravens, you have to get that number down. And there are other ways to do it, right? There are restructures and other ways you can move stuff around where it doesn't necessarily have to be an extension, right? You're not forced to do just an extension, but you are forced to get that number down. So we'll see how that unfolds here. But it was really the big story of the weekend for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson forfeiting this workout bonus, and everybody was talking about why. So, obviously I had to come on here and talk about it because, again, might be a small number to Lamar Jackson. It's obviously a big number in general that he forfeited here, but if that is baked into his contract, his next contract again, it might be $1 million with the workout bonus instead of $750,000 when that new contract is signed. So if that does happen, still forfeits it, hey, it'll help the Ravens even more. You get that extra $250 on top of that $750. So we'll see, and it could even be the Ravens and a free agent or that much off, or just, $500,000 off. The Ravens want to offer a guy X, the player wants Y, and that extra money can maybe help that push a deal over the finish line, or an extension over the finish line for 2026, maybe with that money that you now have, and you can maybe front load a deal a little more than you thought you could. So little things, but whether intentional or not, like I said, this overall, there is undeniably a fact that does help the Ravens, even if it is just that little bit. And it is a great help to Baltimore. I think it's a bigger deal than people are talking about with the help aspect of it. Why it happened, we'll have to defer to Lamar on that because no one can tell us why except for Lamar. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about some underrated players who continue to make impacts at Ravens OTAs. So stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on the show. First, this show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account, wonder where'd all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. I have certainly done that plenty of times, but that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building up your wealth. Managing money with your partner, it really is smoother than ever. I love this aspect of Monarch Money. You can track shared and personal accounts. You can set goals, which is great, and stay on the same page without that stress. And when I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on a lot of things that I just did not know I was spending that much money on. But now I'm able to budget smarter and save more with Monarch Money. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com, 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you on this Monday, kicking off another week of the show. 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens as always, and excited to keep things going as the offseason continues. The offseason churns along. The Ravens will kick off their final week of OTAs today. It'll go through Thursday. They have 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then mandatory minicamp will happen next week. We're going to talk about some underrated players who are making some impacts for the Ravens at OTAs here in the second part of the show, because I think it's important to highlight these guys. And like I was saying in the first part of the show, when the vets aren't there, like a Lamar Jackson, a Derrick Henry, a Kyle Hamilton, those stars, it gives the younger guys or players who are fighting for roster spots opportunities to get their reps in. So I think that's a really valued aspect of that. Now, Justin Robertson over at BaltimoreRavens.com shared guys that he felt were standing out and making impacts here. And Justin and I are in agreement on a lot of these guys in terms of what we've been able to hear, and Justin being out there and, doing some good work. I want to read off some of the guys that he mentioned because these are really important. The first of being Tyler Loop. Loop, as Justin says, hasn't kicked every day at OTAs, but he's been impressive when he's been out there. He made 6 of 6 field goals on Friday, including a 60-yarder. So this was kind of the first Tyler Loop coming out party, which was awesome. John Hoyland struggled with some of his kicks. I mean, as I have said, you don't just want to give the job to Tyler Loop. You want to have that competition. I think it will be good and it will be healthy for him. But I think we can all see the writing on the wall. Unless Tyler Loop had a disaster, and there's still ways to go here. There's still mini camp, training camp, preseason, but he's already making a big impact, and I'm really excited about him. Justin talked about Malaki Starks. He's been all over the place, had an interception at the end of practice, and the reps have been great for him, just learning. He had opportunities to connect and bond with Kyle Hamilton a little bit when Hamilton was on the field. So that chemistry is going to be really, really important. And John Jenkins is someone that Justin noted here as someone that really is a can't miss guy on the practice field, and part of which is because he is just he's a big force, figuratively and literally. He's 6'3", 327. So Justin says it wasn't really hard to spot him on the practice field, but him replacing Michael Pierce, that's a guy that I think, you do lose some pass rush ability with John Jenkins, as we've talked about here on this show, but they didn't need to bring in, the next Brandon Williams or Michael Pierce. They just needed to have a guy that could stop the run, take up some space on that line. And Jenkins is someone who has played full 17 games the past 2 years. He's reliable in that aspect. So yeah, that's someone that I think is going to be really intriguing. Not necessarily a high snap player, but situationally, I think it can work for him. Jalen Armour-Davis, who has been getting some looks at safety, more as a DB, not necessarily just strictly a corner, has been someone that has made an impact here. And Justin noting that he made a play on a ball, batted down a ball near the line of scrimmage on Friday. And, we talked about it on the show when the week rounded out last week on Friday that Zach Orr called Jalen Armour-Davis the smartest player in the defensive back room, one of the smartest DBs they have. So, look, I don't know if Jalen Armour-Davis makes this roster. He if the season started today, he would still be off my roster. There's a lot he has to prove. The Ravens took 2 corners in this draft. If you don't remember that, they have a couple of young guys they're going to want to see as well. So Jalen Armour-Davis is still in a fight for a roster spot. But the fact that you are giving him those reps of safety gives him another avenue to potentially make the roster, which, look, at this point, why not try it out? Why not see what you got? Like, it makes sense to try it. So we'll see how that works out. One of the guys, and this to me was going to be the main story here, Justin mentioning Tez Walker. Tez has been just a beast. You hear stuff coming out of camp, guys talking about what they see here. Justin saying that Tez Walker has stepped up to the plate. Ravens' top 3 wide receivers weren't there on practice at Friday. So Tez Walker steps up. He hauls in several passes. He had an over-the-shoulder and toe-tapping touchdown catch on Friday, and he's been flashing. That's a really good sign. Like, Tez is someone who I could see maybe have that year 1 to year 2 leap. Now, in terms of opportunities, you still do have multiple guys in front of you, not even just in the wide receiver room, but obviously Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, players you're going to be competing with for snaps and targets, more importantly. But look, to have that depth, you saw Zay Flowers go down last year. You saw the Ravens miss Zay Flowers in the playoffs last year. If you can have a reliable guy that can step up in his absence and you don't really have to you don't have that like massive downshift and downgrade, it helps you. So I'm really excited to see Tez Walker continue to progress. It's been rave reviews so far. Now, Justin mentions Lucas Scott is one that was pretty interesting here. If you don't know who that is, he's a former offensive lineman in Army. He had a few catches throughout the week. He's listed here at fullback, but seems like he will be the Ravens practice squad fullback this season. He's been working alongside Patrick Ricard, according to Justin here. So intriguing. And not a guy I'd have on my bucket list or top list of guys, but Justin here mentioning someone that, and look, Ricard's not going to play forever, so maybe Scott can be a guy that takes over. We will see. Ruben Lowry is an undrafted free agent, but he has been making the rounds over the first couple of weeks of OTAs. He has been a ball hawk. He had a bobbling interception on the back of the end zone Thursday, had another interception on Friday. So this is what I'm talking about, right? There are a lot of good young players competing for roster spots, and so you don't need to have your vets out there every single day during OTAs because it gives these younger guys opportunities. So Lowry is a really intriguing free agent for me, or undrafted free agent for me that I think could maybe make an impact, but could be like a practice squad guy that you call up on Sundays a couple times. We will see. Cooper Rush has been up and down, and Justin says that the accuracy for him was on display with Lamar Jackson not present there. He was fitting balls into tight windows, especially during Friday's red zone drills. I know that Rush also has had some moments of struggle during OTAs, but again, best case scenario for the Ravens is Cooper Rush doesn't play a snap unless it's in blowouts. That's it, right? Hopefully Lamar can put together another healthy season, but compared to what the Ravens have had it back up over the last few years, whether it be Tyler Huntley, Josh Johnson, Cooper Rush is an upgrade there. And the man of the hour for a lot of people is Keaton Mitchell, who looks explosive. He says he feels good. He at 22.4 miles per hour. He's all the way back. He has said so. And he has the speed. He looks like himself. And all accounts have said that Keaton Mitchell, the I'm back, right? Keaton Mitchell is back. So I'm really excited to see what he can do as well. And Nate Wiggins adding 10 pounds in the offseason also can't get underrated. I think that's going to be a guy that just continues to build off of an incredible rookie season. He wants to be able to absorb contact more, and I don't think his speed is going to be severely impacted with that. So a lot of guys making impacts here. It's also really cool to hear about, Zach, we're talking about Trenton Simpson, him being a lot more vocal. The Ravens need him to step up in a big role. Some of these other rookies, Mike Green and others, Leonte Wester is someone that a lot of people are talking about. We have had multiple people come on this show and talk about Leonte Wester. He is someone we'll talk a tiny bit more about in the final part of the show, so you won't want to miss that. But it's intriguing and exciting where what you get in Lamar Jackson. What you get in Derrick Henry and these star guys. You don't need to know more about them because you know who they are. And, of course, there are improvements every year. You like to see those, but getting these young players snaps is really, really important. Again, for the offensive line, defensive line, you're not necessarily going to get a lot. You're not going to be able to take away a lot until you get the pads on during training camp, right? There's not contact, and it's hard, right? You don't really see a lot from those groups until the pads come on. But other than that, a lot of guys stepping up so far for Baltimore during OTAs. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll dive into a little bit of a weekend recap, talking about Rashod Bateman reportedly almost getting traded from the Ravens before signing his extension, as well as Lamar Jackson not being able to escape Mike Florio. So stay tuned, plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Monday edition of the show. Really exciting for the Ravens as they continue OTAs here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Guys stepping up like we talked about in the second part of the show. Leonte Wester, though, we have had former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail on the show. We've had Sam and Njoku of the Ravens Talk podcast on the show. Both those guys raved about Leonte Wester. And Sam and Njoku and I talked about this on Friday's episode. If you haven't checked that out, or the bonus episodes we did over the weekend, be sure you go and check them out. But I'll play a little clip here from Sam. He has a hot take on Leonte Wester, and I want to talk about that coming up here on the other side. I feel like, it's not just going to be Leonte sits on the bench for 17 games. I feel like it's in certain spots he could be pretty useful for this offense.
Hot take, Wester is going to be a huge rookie impact player for the Ravens in 2025. He is just, his skill set is what I've been dreaming for the Ravens to get since they lost Marquise Brown. I think that they use Zay Flowers a lot in those gadget type plays, and I think Zay Flowers is predominantly very good in that intermediate short route game that he has going on, and taking him into the back behind a quarterback, I don't think that's really his skill set. Wester has that skill set. I think he's going to be a monster for the Ravens this season. I think that he's going to be one of those rookies. We're talking about, like, how did he get drafted as late as he did? I just think that he has that skill set.
And this is kind of the same conversation that we had with Tez Walker in the second part of the show. It's like, where do those snaps come from? I think the difference for Wester, and Sam noted this, is that the Ravens do kind of need that gadget player. And I think for Zay, yes, he is extremely talented, but we saw during Todd Monken's first year, which happened to be Zay's first year as well, he just tried to force feed Zay the ball in the backfield and tried to use that skill set, which Zay can do it, but he's not the guy to do that. Keaton, obviously, I think, has the better skill set for that. But Leonte Wester, with that speed, the elusiveness, the shiftiness, that to me feels like a great role for him. Where, look, I said it. I don't think Leonte is going to just sit on the bench for 17 games. There are specific packages, specific situations where he can go and make an impact. And he's a really good player. He's not going to jump Zay Flowers or Rashod Bateman or probably even DeAndre Hopkins on the depth chart in year one unless something crazy happens. But you have a really good player there that I think can help you out. And I'm excited to see what he can do with the Ravens this season. Now, a little bit of a weekend recap. We talked about this both on Saturday and Sunday's bonus episodes, but Mike Florio had some comments about Lamar Jackson and his next contract, and really just talked about how the Ravens are probably like looking at options to replace Lamar, long story short. And I'm just like, he mentioned Joe Flacco, he was drafted in 2008, Lamar was drafted in 2018. And, so but by that 10-year timeline, we're like 3 years away from that. But I don't know why. I mean, Joe, at the point that, he was at coming off of the big injury, and he wasn't cutting it. So like, of course, the Ravens will be looking at options. But why would the Ravens look at options right now when Lamar is coming off a year where he was an MVP candidate, probably should have won it, but that's a different conversation. Why are we talking about that? Why are people so quick to just say the Ravens should move off of Lamar? Florida's talking about like shelf lives. I don't get it. I don't understand it. So if you want to hear more about that and Florio's points and my response, be sure to check out Saturday's bonus episode. On Sunday's bonus episode, we talked about Jeremy Fowler's report of Rashod Bateman and how that extension ended up coming to be again for those that missed it. Rashod Bateman signed a 3-year extension with Baltimore, $36.75 million. But Jeremy Fowler saying that Rashod Bateman actually approached the Ravens this offseason and he wanted a new deal. The Ravens essentially said no. They told him, hey, go out there, see a market, go find out a team that wants to pay you. And maybe, go seek a trade. Like, what do you want? Go do it. And Bateman went out. He found a market. Teams like the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Packers were involved. The Ravens saw Bateman at a market and said, oh, hold on. And then they paid him. So that's what Jeremy Fowler is saying happened. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, Jeremy, obviously over at ESPN, a very respected reporter, and has been covering this league, the NFL, for many, many years. But I know that across the Ravens fan base, there were definitely some doubts about the validity of the reporting. So, but again, the timeline to me makes sense. The notion of trading Rashod Bateman does not. That's kind of where I am with that. Like, why would they have traded Rashod Bateman? What's the benefit to them? And again, if this timeline happened before the draft, I guess it makes a little more sense, because if they were going to trade Rashod for like a mid-round pick or something, then they could have selected someone in the draft a couple months ago. But, if this all happened recently, which it doesn't really feel like it did if it did, but if it did, then why? A 2026 pick? That doesn't make sense. So that was kind of my thought process of the whole thing. Bateman has turned into an incredible player, right? Even if they were to trade him for a mid-round pick, that mid-round pick does not help you more than Rashod Bateman does. Would there have been a wide receiver swap involved? Like, would they have traded for Cowboys or Patriots or Packers receiver, do like a little 1-for-1? I mean, depending on who it is, maybe that would have helped. But like, Bateman has shown his value. He's on an incredible contract. His extension, he is still on an incredible contract. It is still the best deal in football. So I just, there's no reason for the Ravens to do that. There was no reason at all. So again, I don't know if it's true or not. Jeremy reporting that, but I think a lot of people in Baltimore are kind of my same mindset. At least that's what I saw, of just like, where does it make sense? Why would you do it? So Bateman's here to stay. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Bateman is here to stay in Baltimore. He and Zay Flowers make up a very, very formidable wide receiver duo. Honestly, a pretty underrated wide receiver duo. And part of that is because Rashod Bateman is pretty underrated as a really good number 2 wide receiver at the very least. So hopefully he'll be able to build upon his year last year. And Bateman wanted that long-term security, but I think it's a good deal for both the Ravens and Bateman. Bateman gets a nice pay raise, and for the Ravens, if he outperforms that contract, which honestly I think he already did last season, but if he continues to outperform it, then the Ravens continue to have Rashod Bateman on a bargain of a deal. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. We'll be back here tomorrow talking more Ravens, so be sure to stay tuned. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.